It's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach, providing information and support while encouraging hope and faith. You can find out more about us by logging on to our website at igbattmho.org. And today I wanted to talk about mental health advocacy. I'm a mental health advocate for individuals who are living with severe and persistent mental illnesses, because I think it's so important for people to understand that having a severe and persistent mental illness is a chronic condition. We're talking about chronic illnesses, and just like any other chronic illness, is an illness that must be and can be managed. Having a severe and persistent mental illness does not mean that your life is over, that you can't move forward in life. It does mean that you may have to move a little slower, but your life is not over. Having a severe and persistent mental illness doesn't mean that you can't have family, that you can't get married, work, go to school, have kids, or do any of those things that you want to do. Having a severe and persistent mental illness just means that you have to manage your illness. What does that mean, to manage your illness? That means you may have to manage your stress. If you have to take medications, it means you may have to take medications. It means that you may have to maybe watch what you eat, your diet, all of those types of things. It's an illness that can be managed. It's not a death sentence. I think it's important as a mental health advocate, I also let you know that an inpatient hospital stay may be the beginning of your recovery process. Everybody doesn't need an inpatient hospital stay, but then there are some who do. But if you do require an inpatient hospital stay, again, it's not the end of the world. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. The good thing about an inpatient hospital stay for those who need one is that it can help you with a couple things. Number one, it can help you to identify exactly what your diagnosis is if you're not sure. It can help you to stabilize your symptoms. If your symptoms are not stable, it can help you to get back on track with the medications. And most importantly, it can connect you to people who are just like you, who are dealing with some of the same symptoms, and you have an opportunity to talk to people in an environment. You have an opportunity to ask questions. You are surrounded by the doctors, the clinical social workers, other professionals who can help you, to kind of to process some of the things that you're going through. Lastly, an inpatient hospital stay can help you connect to an outpatient mental health clinic, to an outpatient facility. So if you have to go into an inpatient hospital stay, a required one is not the end of the world. As a mental health advocate, I think it's important for me to let you know that the problem is not the illness, right? The problem is what we think about the illness. If you think that you are stupid, that you can't, something is wrong with you, that you're an idiot, or you allow the shame to stop you, that is the issue. It's not the illness, because the illness can be managed. Just like any other illness. The illness can be managed. You can still move forward in life. I always tell people that God has created all of us with a wonderful purpose in mind. Just because you have a mental illness or living with a mental illness doesn't mean that purpose has changed. The thing is, you have to begin to realize, okay, make a decision. I'm not going to internalize the shame. I'm not going to internalize the embarrassment. I'm going to move forward with my life because I'm still here, right? Having a mental illness, again, is not the end of the world. A long time ago, when a person was diagnosed with a severe and persistent mental illness, and what do I mean severe and persistent mental illnesses? I'm talking illnesses such as schizophrenia, bipolar, severe depression. Severe persistent mental illnesses are illnesses that impact an individual to such a degree. It impacts maybe their life, well, of course their life, but their family, work. It usually starts younger in age. It's one of those diseases that's so severe and it's chronic, which means that it's long-lasting. So as a mental health advocate, I say again, because we're talking about chronic illnesses, you should not be surprised if you happen to have symptoms. Because symptoms, you may be fine, even with medications, even with talk therapy, or even with taking care of your health, and then you may have some symptoms. Symptoms, when you've been diagnosed with a chronic illness, or if you have a chronic illness, is not the end of the world. It's just part of the illness that can be managed and that you can live with. As a mental health advocate for people with persistent mental illnesses, I'm going to encourage you to make sure that you know who to call in the event of a crisis. Some places have crisis teams, others do not. but you want to know who to call. You want to ensure that you are connected with an outpatient mental health clinic, a community mental health agency, a place like NAMI, so that in the case of an emergency, a psychiatric emergency, you have someone that you can contact. You have someone that you can call. Okay? As a advocate for individuals with severe and persistent mental illnesses, I think it's important that if you have to call the police, I'm going to encourage you to think about what you're going to say when you call. As a mental health advocate, I do understand that mental health crises sometimes occur. And if that is the case, again, think about what are you going to say when you call. Ask yourself, why are you calling the police? The police do a good job. Even those who may not be technically, say, trained in mental health, but overall they do a good job. I've seen many of them. When we hear about police officers having problems with individuals who are having psychiatric emergencies, of course it makes the news. But what doesn't make the news is the number of people that the police have to deal with who have psychiatric emergencies and they handle them just fine. So I just want to say that. But again, it is important that you think about what you're going to say if you're going to call the police. Keep in mind that when you call the police, you're saying that this situation is so unmanageable that you can't handle it, and you're asking the police to come. When the police come, if let's just say you're calling for someone else, if the police come, it's important for you to meet the police, right, at the door. You should be the first person. When you meet the police, don't exaggerate, right? Try to be calm. Try to, explain to police what's going on. Because again, remember, they may not know your loved one. You do. But if you come to the door all anxious, nervous, you don't know what to do, and, you're afraid, it's automatically going to put them in a particular posture. So if you have to call the police, number one, think about why you're calling. Why can't, is there someone else that you can call? Is there a crisis team? Is your loved one connected to a clinic or someone you can call there? But if you do have to call the police, when you call 911, make sure you let them know that it's a mental health emergency, a medical emergency, and that your loved one doesn't have any weapons or anything like that. But again, when the police show up, you want to be the one that they meet at the door, because you want to kind of calmly explain what is going on. You want to go with the police and escort them to where your loved one is, and you want to talk to them about what's going on if you can. Sometimes that is not the case, okay? But again, as a mental health advocate, I think it's important that if you do call the police, you know why you're calling the police, and you know what you want them to do. I think it's important that you are not anxious, that you don't appear afraid or frightened unless you are, because again, the police are going to feed off of you. So it's important that you do that. As a mental health advocate, I think it's important, but if you have a loved one who has been impacted by a severe and persistent mental illness, that you know who to call in the event of emergency. If you are an individual that's living with the severe and persistent mental illness, then you know who to call in the event of an emergency. As a mental health advocate, it's important. I encourage everyone to have a crisis plan. Know what to do in the case of a psychiatric emergency. You want to have a relapse plan, which is a plan that's in place where you can begin to identify what your stressors are, what your triggers are, so that as and if things change, you will be able to kind of make some changes before things really get bad. Think about what the resources are in the area. Make sure you have the numbers to your crisis team if you have one. Make sure you are connected to a community mental health agency, and you have information, phone numbers, after hours information, those types of things. Written down. Remember, hope is always an option. It's never the end. There's always a plan. There's always a strategy. There's always a way out for the problem that you're dealing with. It's important to identify the resources that are in your area. If you're not sure, you can always contact us at igbattmho.org or the suicide hotline at 988. You can get connected to resources in your area, but I want you to know that hope is always an option. As a mental health advocate, it's never over. There's always a plan, there's always a strategy. We just have to find out what that is.